Hey guys, welcome to my garden. If you're new here, my name is Kiera. Feel free to call me Q. And I'm gardening in California in Zone 9B. So we are in the transition of summer to fall and just cleaning out the garden. It's taking us a little bit, but we're slowly kind of like chipping away at certain parts of the garden. So today, my focus is going to be clearing out these 3 beds behind me that are 3 4 by 8 foot beds, and they were my cut flower experiment this year. So it was really fun to grow cut flowers. I'd never really done that before. I'd grown zinnias for the last couple years, but that was kind of it. So this year I did zinnias, cosmos, which were new to me, snapdragons, which were new to me, and straw flower. Tried dahlias with not a lot of success. But it was great. I really loved the experiment. I'll be doing it again in these beds next year. But for right now, for today, what I really want to do is just clean all of this stuff out. A lot of it is disease, so I will be, taking it completely off the property. But the stuff that is good, we will be saving for our compost pile. So I thought I'd take you along and just kind of give you a look at what it's like to clean out a garden like this at the end of the year. And I'll kind of explain what I'm doing and why and how the season went along the way. Okay, so I have a few things here. I got my apron just to kind of cover my clothes a little bit, got some gloves, and I have pruners, like regular size pruners. I have these big guys to take out the really thick stems. And then because some of this stuff is diseased, I brought out some rubbing alcohol so that I can clean my tools in between. The first part of this is just going to be taking out the stuff that we don't want anymore. So some of it is going to go to the city green waste. That's the stuff that's really diseased. The stuff that is okay and salvageable, but we're just done with it, I'm going to put in our compost pile. And then other stuff, a little bit of it, we're going to be keeping for a little while longer. So I want to make sure that I'm cleaning our shears in between all those things so that I'm not just spreading the disease to everything else in our garden. And I'm going to start with this back bed. For this back bed, what we want to do is we want to actually cover this. We're not going to use this for the rest of the season. So we're going to cover it to kill the grass because there's a ton of grass in this bed. And so right now I'm just going to start clearing it out and making piles. First thing I'm cutting out are these tomato plants. These were Roma tomatoes. You can see there's still some fruit in here actually. So anything that I find that's still good, like this one, I'm going to take it out and actually put it in our basket up there. And then the rest of it, this plant looks really good. It's not diseased at all, which usually our tomatoes are very diseased by this point. So I think I'm going to save this one for the compost pile, which is great. I don't usually get to do that with tomatoes. Extend this. So yeah, there are 3 plants in here. So I think what I'm going to do is just do this in sections so that I can kind of find where I'm at. I also want to be really careful because we do have a drip system in here, and so I'm not cutting anything that's actually on the bed itself right now because I don't want to hit that drip system. You know what? I think this would be faster with clippers. So what I did here is I just kind of trimmed off the top of all these plants so that I could kind of go through the jungle of it all and see where the plants themselves started. This was so much faster with smaller clippers. I was able to just kind of take off those branches really easily. It's crazy that this was just 3 plants. We got so much food out of these very small, starts that I had. Here, I was able to actually see the stem of the plant and also to see where my watering system was. And so I went in there with the big loppers and then pulled it out from there. You can also see that there is a string tied to the side there that I'm clipping. And that was because I tried a Florida weave method in this section and the bed right next to it to just kind of hold this up. I did a review video where I talked about all the different trellising methods and, just the garden in general, what I liked and what I didn't like. And basically with this Florida weave method, I just didn't stick to it well enough and the plants got really bushy, and then it was hard to go in later and kind of train them into the string. So it ended up being a flop for me, and that's okay. I think the overall it is a really successful method. It just didn't really work for me, and that's fine. I have other methods that I like a lot better, especially that work well with the amount of time that I have for gardening. So once I cleared out those Roma tomatoes, then I started working on these gigantic cosmos plants. So this is the first time I'd grown a lot of these flowers that I'm pulling out today in this cut flower experiment. And these cosmos especially, I had no idea how they would grow, except for just seeing them on other people's YouTube channels and YouTube videos. These plants were so small for so long, and I feel like overnight they just shot up and got gigantic. So I really loved these. These were, I think, called candy stripe cosmos. And I loved it because the flowers, even on the same bush, they kind of looked different at different stages. And so you got different colors and things like that. So I really, really loved these. And what I learned, one, I definitely do need to trellis these up and kind of give them some railings to keep them from falling over, which was something that I just didn't have time to do this year. I think by the time I would have done it, I was very pregnant, and so it was just kind of like, doing what I can every day. But overall, I'm super happy with these. I think also for the amount of space that I have, I won't plant as many cosmos just now that I see how many flowers you can get off of one plant. I definitely will leave space for other things. So that was really exciting to grow, and really exciting to see how these plants did in arrangements and things like that. The next thing I'm taking out are these zinnias. So these zinnias are definitely diseased. They all have powdery mildew and they're just so done. So there were 3 types of zinnias in here. The red one is Moulin Rouge, the pink one was a Senora, and then there's a kind of purplish pinkish one that was a giant purple. And I really loved all of these. The Moulin Rouge one was the only one I'd grown before, and so it was really nice to kind of add these other 2 colors of specialty zinnias to my garden. Usually I grow just like a mix of zinnias, and then the Moulin Rouge one was the first one that I grew that had a specialty variety for it. Clearing out these zinnias here because they've all grown into the walkway, and so I'm kind of like cutting them out so that I can then get in there and get the rest of these plants out of the garden. So since these plants are so sick, I am just taking them completely out of the garden. They're not going into the compost. These were ones that I think this was the sickest patch just because it was the biggest patch of zinnias. And all of my other zinnias were just kind of tucked away with other things. And so these definitely all had to be removed from our garden. But it was really great having these. This was just another really great experiment. I had some confidence that I could grow zinnias. I actually planted a lot more than I got, so I was a little surprised about that, but overall it was still a success once they got going. And then I'm just clearing out the cosmos that were in this bed too, in the kind of the other half of this bed. And it's kind of crazy seeing the size of these beds. They seem so much bigger when, everything was wild and growing in them. And, then you cut everything out and you see this really kind of small 4x8 bed. And it's an amazing reminder how much you can grow in such a small space, because we got so many flowers out of these little areas, and, we didn't even get all of the flowers. And so it's always really awesome to see what you can do even with a really small garden. And after I pull out those cosmos, there were some snapdragons at the end of this bed here that I decided to leave, and I changed my mind later, and I'll show you what I did later. In the next bed, I was taking out first all the dead zinnias in here, or all the diseased zinnias, I should say, at the end of this bed. There were only really just a couple. This was the bed where my snapdragons did the best, and everything else got eaten really early on in the season. And so those zinnias actually went in way later than everything else. I want to say it was probably 2 months later when I replanted them. So it was great to get some zinnias off of these. There was this really pretty orange color that came out of the mix that I had that I really loved. And yeah, it was really nice to have these also. After these zinnias came out, there were a couple dahlias at the end of this bed that I cut down. They also had powdery mildew on them, and they just were pretty sick. These were plants that got eaten really early on, I think by birds. I think there were pigeons that kind of like topped these pretty much. And so I covered them just with like little strawberry baskets just to see what would happen if they were able to get a couple leaves on them. And it actually worked. And, you know, everything else in the garden started to grow up, and the pigeons stopped kind of like eating everything out of the garden. And so I was able to grow those, but still they were really small and kind of sick. One of them actually never even flowered. And so I took both of those out. And then here, this was a gigantic amaranth plant that it didn't get very tall, but it got really bushy. And I actually did harvest a lot of branches off of that for bouquets. That worked out really, really well. Then it was just a matter of, you know, continuing to clean up this bed. On the end here, there's a ton of grass, but what I'm pulling out here is actually sweet alyssum. So I had a really small extra sweet alyssum start that I put in one of the holes where I just didn't have another plant. And it got massive and kind of took over this whole side of the bed. And then I found all of these like black and orange beetles in here, in the grass and in the sweet alyssum. These beetles are actually everywhere in the garden this year. I don't know if they're a pest or if they're beneficial or not. I just kind of left them. But they were all over the beans, all over the cucumbers, and all of that too. So I'm pulling out a ton of sweet alyssum. That was one, like, you know, inch, kind of like an inch long plant in the beginning, which is kind of wild. And then I'm also pulling out a lot of just really long grass here. And it's really satisfying actually to pull all of this out and just kind of clean this up, especially since it is the front of our garden. So now I'm at a transition period where I've cut out all of the sick stuff and all the stuff that I know we don't want. And so I'm just taking a minute to kind of clean my tools in between. But this was also just a really good stopping point for me for this day. And I had plans for keeping everything else in this garden and just kind of like cleaning it up a little bit. You will see in the next part of this video, I changed my mind on a few things and we'll go over that. Okay, I think this was the next day. I came out here again, and this was the first bed that we did that had the Roma tomatoes in it. I left these straw flowers on the first day because my plan here was to cut them so that I could use them as a dried flower bouquet and use them for decorating the house during the fall. So I had seen a bunch of people talk about using straw flowers for, you know, dry flower arrangements and stuff like that. And I did actually like how they dried and, you know, kept their color and their shape and all of that. And so I decided to give it a try. Now that I've had these in the house drying for a little bit, they actually got kind of fuzzy and a lot of the heads did change and get weird. I hung them up upside down, but I think I actually harvested some of them too late. And so they actually continued their life cycle, it looks like, and became little fluff balls of seeds inside the house hanging upside down. So that didn't quite work out, but it's okay. I have more straw flowers and I'm going to give it another shot. But it was really pretty, you know, harvesting these, and I really liked these two colors. And so at the very least, I have seeds that I can save and plant again for next year. These straw flowers I also got in a mix, and so I had no idea what colors I was actually going to get. And so it's nice now I know that the ones that I pulled from these plants are going to be those white ones with the little, pink edges, or the ones that are more white. And I love that I can now label those seeds as, at least one of those two and use them again. So after I harvested what I wanted from the star flowers, I cut this plant down. This was another plant where, it started off so small and I didn't think they were going to make it. And then they just shot up in a really short matter of time. And so I was really, really happy with these. The next thing that happened in this back bed was I started pulling up the landscape fabric that I put as an experiment in just this bed. So what I did here was I had some just leftover landscape fabric. This is, really kind of like see-through stuff still, but I had it left over from our old house in an old project. And what I did is I put that down, I cut holes in it, put it down, and then I actually ended up covering it with straw just because so much light was getting underneath it. The grass had just no problem growing underneath it at all. And so it did have to be covered with something else. In our previous house, I had covered it with wood chips and it was totally fine. Nothing came up. I think what happened here is, the grass got a really good head start, and so it was coming up no matter what. We had a mess of just grass coming up through all of the holes, and here I'm literally having to pull the fabric apart just to get it out of the beds because there's so much grass in it. So the straw is on top of it and all of that stuff too, so it's a bit of a mess, but it's really just the grass that took over this half of our garden and the back part of our garden. We wood chipped all of it at the beginning of the year, but because we didn't have enough wood chips to completely finish the project, the grass got going and then it slowly just creeped over, slowly, pretty quickly actually, creeped over and just kind of took over all of that wood chipped area. And so this was kind of a pain. I didn't like that I had to do this, especially since I was hoping that I could reuse this fabric. But that's okay. It was really just an experiment. It was extra stuff that I had, and I didn't want to go out and buy, new supplies on an experiment. And so now I know. This bed is one of the beds that we are going to be tarping completely over the winter. So I'm not going to be planting anything new in this bed so that we can tarp it and hopefully, kill this grass and reclaim it again for spring. So now we're in the middle bed, and this was the bed that had the golden nugget cherry tomatoes, and then it had the biggest patch of zinnias in it. And I had left these snapdragons on the end because my first plan was I wanted to just kind of try mowing down all the snapdragons to see if I could get a second sowing, or it would be a third sowing at this point, of the snapdragons. And as I was cutting these out, I realized that this wasn't even the best patch of snapdragons that I had. And also, I started a ton of new snapdragons for the fall. So pretty quickly here, I decided to just actually cut the plants out instead of just kind of mowing the tops of them. So I put the clippers down and I got the big guns out and, just completely took these plants out. And I'm going to be replacing them with new snapdragon plants on the end here. Since the filming of this, I filled the majority of this bed with little basil plants because I'm hoping to see if I can grow a lot more Italian basil into the fall before our first frost comes. So here I'm just putting the irrigation to the side so that I am sure not to cut it as I take these plants out, and just being really careful because we definitely don't want to be messing up our drip lines. And yeah, just cleaning this up. So right now, like I said, this bed is full of basil, and there's a little bit of space at the end here where these snapdragons were, where I'll be putting in new ones. The basil's doing really well, and I am hopeful that we will be able to get a little bit of more basil into the fall. And this is an experiment to see if we can successfully do it again next year, maybe starting the basil a little bit earlier. And I really want to see how much we can get so that we can freeze it for pesto before the plants start bolting. So that is really the struggle that we have in the summertime is it's so hot that all of our basil, as soon as it gets like big and bushy, it starts to flower and it changes the flavor of the basil. It gets a little more like licoricey smelling and tasting. And so I wanted to see what would happen if I started some basil in the fall and just see, how much we can get before our first frost, which is usually around like Thanksgiving to, one of the first couple weeks of December. So we have a really long season here. And then here I'm taking out those golden nugget cherry tomato plants. I have to cut the string first on them for that Florida weave method that I attempted and did not successfully continue, but it's okay. And so I took these 3 plants out. These tomatoes, we got so much off of these 3 little plants. They were the first tomatoes to ripen at least a month or 2 before any of the others. And, they were supposed to be determinate plants, but they just kept going the entire season. You can see that there's still fruit on them. Some of it is really old, but I did end up taking the stuff that was still good, and we've since eaten those. But yeah, I really love this little plant. We do really enjoy the Super Sweet 100 cherry tomatoes more, which are a red variety. But these were great to, one, get tomatoes earlier and to get a fun color to mix in. This was the second year I'd grown these, and I'll definitely be growing them again. There was also a companion basil plant behind these tomato plants, and I took that out as well just to kind of clean up the entire area. This was the day where I really just started cleaning everything. This is kind of how I am. In the beginning, I want to save things and I feel really bad, and I want to just keep as much as I can. But then I start going, and I really love clean slates and like projects that look done. And so on this day, I really just started like decided I was going to clear out a ton more than I had originally planned, which I'm totally cool with. And I'm really happy I did now because it feels like more of the garden is usable for fall now. Now, this is our gigantic mess of snapdragons. These were beautiful. They were short, so they were supposed to get a lot taller than this, but I'm still so happy with this because we got a ton of snapdragons. I'd never grown snapdragons before. I started these way too late. I thought that they were just not going to do anything because of how hot it gets. But with a mixture of us having kind of a milder, cooler spring leading up into our summer, and then the fact that they're in these front beds that get a lot more shade because of the big trees in the back there, they did actually really well, and we got a lot of flowers off of these. And so this is where I'm trying the experiment where I'm trying to just kind of like mow the top off of these. This would have been a lot faster if I had, a hedge trimmer or something like that, but we don't have one. And so I just went in there with clippers and gave them a really uneven haircut just to kind of see what happens. So this was the one patch of the flower experiment that I did leave. And like I said, I have more snapdragons too that I'm planting out that are new baby ones because I saw in like a local flower farm that they actually start snapdragons in the fall. And so I just wanted to see what that looks like. So I'm trying that too as well. Then I'm just like, because I wanted the bed to look nice and clean, I cleaned out some grass on the end. And then on the middle section here, there was Bermuda grass that, I think it's Bermuda grass, but grass that just got really long in the walkways. And so I pulled that up. The cool thing about this is because the grass just gets really long and has these crazy long runners, there's actually not that much grass in the walkway itself, which is awesome. So you can see I can roll this up pretty good, and it's because it's all runners, which is awesome. And so it felt really nice to kind of tidy that up a little bit. This is something that's not going to go in our compost. I just kind of put it to the side. It's going to go in the city bin just because I don't want that grass spreading all over the place. it was great to see my wood chips again because I really like the look of them. So here I'm just showing the final product. There's the bed with a ton of grass that we're going to cover. There's the middle bed that actually didn't have a lot of grass in it, which was really awesome. I think because those cosmos got so big and the zinnias got so big. And then there was the front bed with the snapdragon hedge that I left. So this felt really good. And then at the end of this, I just had a couple things to harvest. And so this is actually the other side of the garden where our wood chips are really good. And this is kind of the shadier side of our garden. And so there were some tomatoes here and peppers here. We have some critter that has been getting into our garden at night and like taking massive bites out of things. It doesn't seem to be a squirrel. I think it's either a skunk or a possum. And I say that because our dog has barked while he's outside kind of late at night before we just like take him to bed. And he's been sprayed by a skunk a few times. And so we know we do have skunks in the area. And then the other night I came out and he had a possum on the fence. And so he doesn't catch them. He's fast enough to like, you know, get sprayed by a skunk, but we don't think he's fast enough to catch them or anything like that. But yeah, so something's been coming in and just enjoying midnight snacks in the garden, which is kind of frustrating when you know, see this beautiful pepper, you turn it around and there's a chunk missing out of it and little teeth marks. But what I've done here is just kind of taken the stuff that is mostly ripe, especially these tomatoes that are low to the ground, and let them ripen in the house so that we at least get them, you know, and they're not wasted to the critters. Thank you so much for joining me in my garden today. I hope you had as much fun, you know, watching this transition as I did doing it. And until next time, happy growing. Bye.